Hi there guys, and welcome to every episode of The Simpsons Season 31 reviewed. As ever with the HD seasons, I'm not expecting much, but I will give these episodes a fair shake regardless. One thing to note about this season is that it was ongoing when COVID first hit, so some of the staff had to work from home for a bit and that kind of stuff. From what I gather though, it didn't actually delay or affect this season in any way. All of the 22 episodes still came out on time. Whether that's a good thing or not, I guess will depend on the quality of them. By the way, my apologies guys for this video taking a bit longer than normal. Over Christmas and the New Year, I was unfortunately a bit sick with the flu, so that kind of put the brakes on my output. I even binged a good chunk of these episodes, while laying in bed with nothing better to do. I am thankfully on the mend now though, and I did try not to let my somber mood at the time affect how I rated these episodes. I don't know if it is noticeable or not, but if my voice does sound a bit different, that's why. I hope you can at least tolerate it anyway. As ever, before I actually start with these episodes, there is a link to the Simpsons wiki below for anything you may want to know about the show. And with that said, let's get into it. Season 31, Episode 1, The Winter of Our Monetized Content. When a video of Bart and Homer fighting goes viral, they become social media celebrities. My trivia for this one is that the title of this episode is a reference to John Steinbeck's 1961 novel, The Winter of Our Discontent, and my best moment was Homer getting yellow paint on his head during his fight with Bart, as you can see in that picture on the right there. The season opener got a 2 out of 5. Not quite the start I wanted to see from the season. It's a fairly mundane effort that lacks any real point. The main plot, I think, is trying to tackle how people get hooked onto social media sites like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., and how some people will do anything for clicks and likes. However, it never really goes deep into that, so whatever satire was here came across as a bit flat. Homer and Bart had some decent moments early on, with less squabbling. Homer's face with the yellow and black paint, and Comic Book Guy, and Kumiko's cosplay were actually decent moments. However, the hipster guy, milking Homer and Bart for views, was just annoying. Sure, they gave it up in the end, but I would have preferred it if they actually turned on him and gave him a piece of their mind. Instead, he just kind of fades away. The subplot of Lisa getting detention at school was equally as tame. Again, some satire was attempted about private prisons and underfunded schools, but it was all too brief and muddled for any actual point to be made. Quite frankly, a disposable start to the season. Season 31, Episode 2, Go Big or Go Homer. Homer is demoted to supervising interns, among whom is a millennial named Mike. He asks Homer to be his mentor. So Mike actually mentions Homer being Mr. Plow. He just knew everything about his life. And my best moment was Mr. Burns shooting Mike with an old pellet gun. This one gets another 2 out of 5. I was never really able to get into this one. I don't know why anyone would admire Homer to the extent this Mike guy does. So that part made no sense to me, and because of that, I couldn't really get into this guy and Homer's relationship. And as it turned out, I was right not to. It all ended with a relatively weak showdown with the mob after Mike borrowed money from them for his dumb pizza slice idea. Halfway through the episode, they did hint at some Homer character stuff when he was upset, that none of his family truly respected his skills. However, they never went anywhere with this, or had Homer try to better himself in any way. This was also not that entertaining overall. Mike was more annoying than he was funny, and I think Bart crying after Mike insulted him was a bit over the top. I don't think he should really care that much, to be honest. There were some okay jokes though. Marge's eye not letting her stare at Homer was one. I did also enjoy someone finally shutting Mike up, as Burns promptly did by pulling out a gun. I wonder whether he has that behind his desk at all times. Season 31, Episode 3, The Fat Blue Line. After much of the town have their wallets pickpocketed, Fat Tony is put in jail. However, Chief Wiggum thinks he is innocent and sets out to free him. My trivia for this one is that the episode's opening parodies Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody performance at the Live Aid concert of 1985, and my best moment was the ending showdown. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. I liked some of the things tried here, making it an episode focusing on Fat Tony getting framed and having Wiggum trying to clear his name. It was a nice change up of their dynamic, and a nice way to shine a spotlight on those two characters. The pacing, however, did feel a bit off. In Act 1 we had a guest appearance from Jason Momoa, which went on for far too long and basically just consisted of the writers going, "Hey, did you know he was Aquaman? Well, we're just gonna keep telling you again and again until you know for sure." Soon after we had the opposite problem of there being too many cutaway jokes and quick moments, like Ralph and Chief Wiggum's elephant dance, or Maggie parking a toy car. They just never gave the episode time to breathe. Despite all these criticisms of how the episode was handled technically, the core plot and story remained interesting. The final showdown was quite dramatic. Johnny Tightlips had a semi-important role here, and it was nice to see Fat Tony actually be innocent in the end. Even Wiggum desperately seeking validation from the woman was a decent joke. Overall, with this episode you have to take the rough with the smooth, but the latter just about outweighs the former. Season 31, Episode 4, Treehouse of Horror 30. The 3 short stories this year are Danger Things, Heaven Swipes Right, and When Harry Met Slimy. So this is episode number 666, and it was planned out to be that way for Treehouse of Horror 30 in advance. My best moment was Homer being so enthusiastic to help Selma get to another galaxy. This year's Halloween episode gets a 2 out of 5. Part 1 tried to be a parody, but it was too rushed to have it really sink in. It suffered from the same problems as the previous episode actually. Too many jokes were rammed in, and it left nowhere for the story to go. No wonder the intro went on for like 2 minutes, because they clearly had no faith in this segment. Incredibly, the second segment might have been even worse than the first. Let's see. God selling heaven to Google was a rather flat gag, and while the Google guys gave Homer unlimited bodies to keep reincarnating, made no sense. It was even a little confusing, because they kept showing Homer as normal 1 second, then in another body the next. I found it a bit hard to keep track of, to be honest. Needless to say, that is not a recipe for an entertaining short story. The final part was the only one which was somewhat entertaining. It was a fresh idea to have Patty and Selma hook up with Kang and Kodos, and out of everyone in Springfield, those two fit better than anyone. Sure, the ending showdown was a little rushed, but it was nice to see the aliens delete everyone, then run off with Patty and Selma. The jokes are what really make this segment though, and in turn save the entire episode from being a 1. Mr. Burns saying, "Len, I dissect you tonight," as a response to Kang was good, as was the woman doing sign language even though she could talk. The moment I did genuinely find funny was Homer being there in an instant, after Selma requested his help to leave. Season 31, Episode 5, Gorillas on the Mast. After a trip to a water park, Lisa becomes determined to set free Springfield's most vicious animals. Meanwhile, Homer fulfills a dream of buying a boat, but quickly realizes the cost. My trivia for this one is that the boat salesman sings Drunken Salesman, which is a parody of the song Drunken Sailor. And my best moment was just Homer's boat trips. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. And this one just about scrapes the 3 because both stories were decently fleshed out and had some entertainment to carry them, which is a bit of a rarity nowadays. That being said, there's nothing that really stands out for you to get too excited over. Lisa helping Bart embrace altruism by setting animals free was okay. I mean, there are arguments to have about how ethical zoos and aquariums are for sure, but this episode didn't really get into them, instead just focusing on Bart and Lisa helping these dangerous animals get free, and portraying that purely as a good thing. It was also a bit silly how all of the animals in the episode were completely okay with Lisa and Bart, but okay. That's just cartoon logic, I guess. I also have to say that the Jane Goodall character, sharing the same model as Dr. Bushwell from Simpsons Safari, was quite lazy. It came across as confusing, given that in that episode she didn't care about the animals, but here she has a proper sanctuary for them. Overall, I liked Homer getting a boat a little more. Sure, the salesman overstayed his welcome. If he's not Bob the RV salesman, then he has no business taking up this much screen time. But Homer's time with Marge, Grandpa, and all the co-owners of the boat had a lot of energy to it. Lenny being obsessed by his cappuccino head, and the guy in a ticket booth were the best out of an average pile of jokes. Season 31, Episode 6, Marge the Lumberjill. When Marge realizes that everyone views her as boring, she takes up competitive lumberjacking. My trivia for this one is that this was the first episode where Great Delisle voices Martin Prince, as well as Sherry and Terry, after Rusty Taylor's death on the 26th of July 2019. And my best moment was Lisa breaking the fourth wall about the family's previous vacations. This one got a 2 out of 5 from me. This is one of those episodes that is coherent and does the basics at storytelling, but the journey getting there is so bland and uneventful that I just can't bring myself to care. They once again try to touch on Marge's insecurities about being perceived as only this boring housewife. However, they fail to expand on it in ways we haven't seen before, and these random lumber competitions doesn't exactly tie it all together smoothly. Also, the bits about Homer being jealous are needless retreads of plotlines past. I guess Pura was fine as a character, and the ending got everything back to normal. It's just very average, what can I say? The episode also wasn't particularly funny, but I did like Lisa essentially calling out the previous travel episodes, how they always fall in love with a new place and want to stay, only to find out something bad and realise that there is no place like home. That is exactly the criticism I have had of those travel episodes, so I was glad to see the show at least self-aware about it. Of course, that will only make it more infuriating if they do it again, but let's hope they don't. Season 31, Episode 7, Livin La Pura Vida. The Simpsons join the other Springfield families on the Van Houten's annual trip to Costa Rica. While there, Homer befriends Patty's new girlfriend, Evelyn. My trivia for this one is that this episode title is a reference to Ricky Martin's hit single, Livin La Vida Loca, and my best moment was Homer's imagination gags. This one gets a 3 out of 5. There were a lot of decent ingredients here, maybe too many. In fairness, they did start all things fairly quick, which meant they could devote a decent chunk of time to each character's story. Lisa being so worried about the money was a bit of a negative in my opinion. I mean, just let her be a kid and enjoy things for a change. She doesn't always have to be the negative one. If nothing else though, I guess it did set up the money issue early in the episode, so it didn't come out of nowhere at the end. Speaking of that ending, I think it worked fairly well, mainly because the twist of the Van Houtens owning the house was an interesting one that was quite unpredictable. Not sure about them conning all their friends, but whatever. I also have to touch on Patty and her new girlfriend Evelyn. That was the best part of the episode in my opinion. Her being basically a female version of Homer was a nice idea, and it was interesting to see how Patty dealt with that. It was good that Marge was able to give her a good talk, which convinced Patty to take her back. Hopefully we see more of these two in the future. There were a few decent gags here, as well as some not too stellar ones. I never liked Shauna as a character, so her scenes in this episode were a waste of time for me. However, I did like Marge rushing home at the start, and how they referenced it later on. And as mentioned, my favourite bits were Homer imagining all of Evelyn's southern analogies. It's always fun watching his imagination run wild. Season 31, Episode 8, Thanksgiving of Horror. The Simpsons are forced to face various Thanksgiving nightmares, including the first Thanksgiving, an AI mishap, and a dangerous space mission. And my trivia for this one was that the end credits features footage of the Bart Simpson balloon from the 1990 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And the best thing about the episode, more than just a moment, was just the whole vibe of it really. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. It was an interesting idea to make a Thanksgiving themed 3-parter, and it was certainly better than the Treehouse of Horror we got this year. The first part though was decent, but no more than that. It certainly had aspects of a parody, but it ended up just being the townspeople as turkeys being hunted down. It tried to make things interesting with a crazed Wiggum, and all the silly turkey sounds the characters make, but that stuff only barely makes up for the predictable ending, where the family are all okay. The second part was better, perhaps the best of the three. I like how they took things slow at the start, with Homer speaking to this AI version of Marge. Because she technically is Marge, they build up a bit of a connection, so after she makes food perfectly, it's unsurprising that Homer feels torn between her and the real Marge. The episode portrays her quite sympathetically, despite just being AI, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if it's trying to make some satirical point about how people could end up getting emotionally attached to AI or not, but either way, it made sure the ending conflict between the two Marges had some meaning behind it. The final part was as aggressively gruesome and bloody as the first, but it was a bit more creepy with this alien-like cranberry sauce ripping people's skeletons out of their bodies. It sounds like some Mortal Kombat type stuff, in all honesty, but it didn't bother me really. Maybe the timing was a bit unfortunate, given that this was the last time Rusty Taylor's voice was heard voicing Martin, but hey, they weren't to know that, were they? The segment did its job presenting this thing as a menacing presence, and was entertaining enough to watch. Nothing more to add really. Overall, this episode served as a nice departure from the normal format. It was not the funniest thing ever, save from a few jokes, like Abe the Turkey's rambling story, or Homer spending extra so AI Marge could feel pain, but as I said, the whole vibe just felt right to me. Despite being a bit gruesome and violent at times, the episode felt strangely approachable to me. Season 31, Episode 9. Todd, why hast thou forsaken me? Todd, still struggling with the death of his mother, rejects his faith, causing great distress for Ned. He sends Todd to live with the Simpsons in an attempt to scare him back to God. My trivia for this one is that during the opening sequence, Ned has blueprints for Noah's Ark on his garage wall, and my best moment was Todd being able to hear everything Homer and Marge were doing. This one gets a 2 out of 5. This was an interesting concept that maybe would have had more impact if it was done a few seasons after Maud's death, not 20. Still though, Todd questioning his faith after struggling to get over the loss of his mum is a relevant and meaningful topic. I have never been a religious person myself, but obviously grief is something we all have to face at some point, and I can imagine especially for kids raised in religious households, after a tragic event like that, there may well be some confusion going on for sure. That's not to say that religion is necessarily bad for them. I know that many people do find comfort in their beliefs, but in my opinion, that's up for them to find out by themselves, and it helps if their parents, or parent in this case, have honest conversations with them. Ned here didn't handle it particularly well, and him sending Todd to stay with the Simpsons was pretty harsh. The ending was also a tad contrived, with Ned and Homer getting hit by a car, and Todd's faith being restored after they get better. Lisa, Marge and Homer were all a bit pushy and unlikable here, which did not help the mood of an already somber episode. As you would expect given the plotline, the episode was not particularly funny either. Homer remembering back to Mono was decent I guess, and I did like the running gag of Homer and Marge never being able to keep quiet from Todd. However, all of the heaven gags fell flat for me. Overall, I do have to say about this one that it did an okay job expanding on Todd and his feelings about his situation some more. However, any positives from that are more than negated by all the other flaws the episode had. Season 31, Episode 10, Bobby It's Cold Outside. Sideshow Bob gets the job as this year's Mall Santa. Meanwhile, someone is stealing all the Christmas packages off people's front porches. My trivia for this one is that this episode's title of course references the song Baby It's Cold Outside. And my best moment was just being able to learn some more about the childhood Mr. Burns had. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. This was a very run-of-the-mill Sideshow Bob episode. It touched on all the story beats you would expect, and was pretty inoffensive overall. Sure, Bob didn't actually have that much to do really, but the novelty of him trying to track down Mr. Burns was kind of cool. It was also nice to get more of a solid glimpse of Burns' parents and upbringing. We have only really got one-off jokes about that before. So yeah, the story was fairly simple, but the episode did deliver a few nice things to make it more watchable. Some of the animation was nice, and there was the odd good gag too. The baby shark reference I could have done without though. Even by the time this episode came out, it was already kind of dated. Just an average Christmas episode in the end. Season 31, Episode 11, Hail to the Teeth. Homer and Marge attend Artie Ziff's wedding and become uncomfortable when they realize his bride-to-be is a clone of Marge. Meanwhile, Lisa grapples with getting new braces. My trivia for this one is that Bridal Chorus, the 1850 opera by Richard Wagner, can also be heard among loads of other songs being played at Artie's wedding. And my best moment was Lisa's debate with W.S. Buckler. I gave this episode a 2 out of 5. Both the plots here felt like weaker versions of things we have seen before. Obviously whenever Artie Ziff turns up, he's going to be up to some shady stuff to try and win Marge over. Here though, I never found him as funny as I often do. And him having all these Marge robots was very creepy. It would have been fine if the episode lent into that and fully acknowledged how creepy it is, but instead Marge had a rather tame reaction to them. It just seemed to be brushed over, when in reality Artie is one messed up dude. The side plot of Lisa getting braces has obviously been done before, in Last Exit to Springfield. Now this was never going to live up to that episode, but they could have still done more. They tried to give it a message about Lisa's self-confidence, but I never quite brought into how the episode presented the issue. They insinuated that people only care about what women look like, and not what they say. A real kind of feminist message there. Now that may have been a widespread problem in the past, and I'm sure some people still do have that view today. However, I don't think that women in general find it that hard to make themselves heard nowadays. This episode was also quite boring, with hardly any jokes landing. The only decent moment was a school debate. I liked how out of place W was, and Martin's desperate attempt to Photoshop Lisa smiling. Season 31, Episode 12, The Miseducation of Lisa Simpson. The sea captain finds a treasure he's been searching for all his life, but it's taken from him by the town. Marge convinces the people of Springfield to build a new school with the money. So my trivia for this one is that Coral imagined himself wearing George Jetson's clothes and sitting at his office with his feet up, parodying the Jetsons opening sequence. And the best thing about the episode for me was the sea captain's story. I gave this episode a 2 out of 5. I like the start of this, learning about the sea captain's origins and how he is actually spending his whole life searching for treasure, all while putting on the mask of being this incompetent sailor. That was some nice insight into the character. I think it was the right decision to cut that story short though. It would be a big ask for a small character like him to sustain a full episode. The problem was, the main story they pivoted to was not that interesting to me. This show has touched on technology and automation in regards to its potential effects on people's jobs before, and while I do agree that it probably will cause some real problems in the future, this episode never really made much of a point about it. Instead, they made this new modern school. I was enjoying seeing Bart actually liking school for a change, and in my opinion Lisa was a bit of a buzzkill for trying to ruin his fun. Sure, her intentions were pure. She wanted everyone to have access to the best education, like she got in her gifted class. But in reality, not every kid will be suited to that kind of thing anyway. Every person is going to have different strengths. For some, like Lisa, that may well be intelligence. But for others it may be sport, for example, or some kind of obscure talent, that if nurtured, could give them a clear career path. That's why I've never been a massive fan of the school system, to be honest. Sure, everyone could benefit from knowing life skills, like how to read and write, and do basic math, but beyond that, I think it would be much more beneficial to treat kids as individuals, rather than judging them all by how well they can do a random test, and regurgitate answers for a subject they may not even care about. Of course, I totally understand that I'm being idealistic there, and it's probably never going to happen, but I thought I would give you my take on it regardless. As for the rest of this, it was pretty boring. The ending was predictable, and there were no funny jokes either. Season 31, Episode 13, Frinkcoin. Professor Frink develops a cryptocurrency and overtakes Mr. Burns as the richest man in Springfield. However, he struggles to know who his real friends are. My trivia for this one is that the cryptocurrency song is a parody of That's Life, originally by Marion Montgomery, and my best moment here was the ending. I gave this one yet another 2 out of 5. This episode couldn't make its mind up on what it wanted to be. At first I thought they would go into detail about cryptocurrency, but after one decent video about it, they left it alone. Frink getting so rich so soon felt a bit unrealistic, and the whole cliche of the sad lonely billionaire was all we got from him for the rest of the episode. The Mr. Burns side of things also felt like filler, with his failed crypto and the running gag of Smithers calling him Monty. The best scenes in the episode were the brief breaks we took of Lisa interviewing Frink. That was the only solid thing here in my opinion, and had they focused on that dynamic a bit more, this probably would have been better. It's why I liked the ending. Sure, Frink himself solving the puzzle to go back to normal was very predictable, but him declaring Lisa a true friend was a sweet moment to end on. However, due to the rest of the story and humour missing the mark, this was still a below average episode. Season 31, Episode 14, Bart the Bad Guy. Bart sees a new superhero movie a month before it comes out, and the world cowers before his new plot-spoiling powers. He takes his chance to become the supervillain Spoiler Boy. My trivia for this one is that the two movie parodies in this episode are of Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. My best moment here was the ending joke. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. This was well written. The idea of Bart seeing this anticipated movie sequel before everyone else and using his spoiler power to manipulate people was a clever idea. They really got down a vibe of how people act about spoilers quite well, and the parodies of the Marvel movies and characters were all well presented. Some people may say Bart was a bit too unlikable here. He did kind of screw Milhouse over, and did blackmail pretty much the whole town other than Homer, but I don't think it crossed the line here. We can accept and expect a level of mischievous behaviour from him, so as long as it doesn't go too far, I'm fine with it. He does do the right thing in the end, of course, even if he was tricked into doing it by the studio executives. The story also lent itself to being quite entertaining. I like the movie fight scenes and their animation, as well as the ending of the people who just saw the movie immediately getting on their phones and spoiling it for as many people as possible, after they just spent the whole episode being outraged over spoilers. Most people really are hypocrites when it comes to this stuff, so I was glad the show pointed it out. An enjoyable one for sure. Season 31, Episode 15, Screenless. Marge implements a screen time limit for the whole family. However, she soon realizes that she is the one addicted. My trivia for this one is that Half Month is a parody of the online video game Fortnite, and my best moment was Maggie trying to alert everyone to Hans Mole Man being stuck under a tree. I gave this one a 2 out of 5. This premise always felt like it was struggling to justify being a single focus of an episode. There wasn't much to it really, which is why they had to pad out the episode with long drawn out gags. I mean, it's fine to explore the family getting hooked by their devices, especially when it turns out that Marge is the one really addicted. However, it feels almost like something that should set up an episode, rather than be the main focus. The bits where they go to this rehab center were quite bland and didn't really make any clear point about whether all this technology is good or bad for a family unit. Instead, they had this evil guy who was scamming people using their email addresses. It was all a bit messy in my opinion, and when you combine it with subpar jokes, it's another episode that just feels lackluster, which gets it a 2 rating. I did at least like Maggie using sign language to try and help poor Hans Mole Man. Literally no one in the family cared enough to notice though, sadly. Season 31, Episode 16, Better Off Ned. Bart bonds with Ned Flanders, leaving Homer jealous, so he retaliates by mentoring Nelson Muntz. My trivia for this one is that the sign in front of the landfill says 50,000 seagulls can't be wrong, and that's a reference to Elvis Presley's album 50,000 Elvis fans can't be wrong. And my best moment was, well, sadly I found none that was worthy of mention. And that kind of gives away this episode's rating of a 1 out of 5. This is one of those episodes where the main problem is that pretty much everything here is a worse version of things we have seen before, both from the movie and Brother from the Same Planet. Both with Bart spending time with Flanders, and Homer getting jealous of not being Bart's main father figure. They never really put their own twist on it either. The scenes of Ned and Bart fishing were really reminiscent of the movie, and the problem was they never carried the same weight here. Partly because it's hard to be invested after seeing this so many times before, and partly because the characters here were a bit unlikable. Homer was for sure, and the Nelson family mess is never a great addition to an episode in my opinion. I could be slightly less harsh on this if the episode wasn't such a bore. That really is the worst of it. I didn't find one decent moment here, and the snot joke was pretty grim. This was sadly the worst of the season, and the first to be a 1. Season 31, Episode 17, Highway to Well. Marge gets a job at a high-end marijuana dispensary, but Homer and Moe open a competing dispensary that mimics the experience of buying it illegally. My trivia for this one is that this episode's title is modelled after the AC/DC song Highway to Hell, and my best moment was Lenny being the weird friend who never acknowledges you. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. This episode started out fairly interesting. Even though I'm not usually interested in weed culture or anything like that, the whole topic of it being legal or not has been done to death, so I was glad they never went into detail on that. Instead, this focused more on someone like Otto, who has always been hooked on the stuff, but didn't find the same rush after it was made legal. Now I know plenty of people do feel that way, whenever something is not taboo anymore. I think that's just a part of human nature to an extent, so I was glad to see that explored here. I also enjoyed Homer, Lenny and Moe creating this fake drug dealer place. It was a nice contrast to Marge's way of doing things. The plot did revert back to type by the ending, with Homer and Marge squabbling over their new jobs. However, they never made a big deal out of their problems, so it was a bit easier to take, even if it made no sense how Marge changed her mind about betraying Homer so easily. The jokes here were decent actually. Lenny being a totally oblivious guy playing video games fits so naturally for him. I also liked Marge's anxious noises, hurting the ears of the people listening with headphones. All in all, this was okay. Nothing more to be said. Season 31, Episode 18, The Incredible Lightness of Being a Baby. Maggie makes friends with baby Hudson, but Marge won't let her play with him because of his annoying mother. Meanwhile, Cletus becomes a helium tycoon, so Mr. Burns wants Homer to help him obtain it. So this episode is actually a follow-up to Playdate with Destiny, which was a short film released on April 10th, 2020 on Disney+. And I haven't seen it, so I can't give you my opinion on whether it is good or not. My best moment was the hallucination caused by the Cletus liquor. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. Both plots here were fairly simple and on the short side, which is why they had to add that Cletus and Homer song at the end. In fairness though, they were also both serviceable and provided some decent character appropriate jokes. It was nice to see Maggie actually playing with other babies, as we don't usually get to see her make connections, for the obvious reason that she is a baby. But as we know, she does carry some personality, so I can buy into her making friends and enemies with others. The bit with Marge falling out with the other mum is akin to many plot lines of the past, so I didn't care for that part so much. Homer befriending Cletus also worked for me, mostly because it felt quite authentic. Cletus does seem like the type of guy to be a bit gullible with the friends he makes, but at the same time his family are armed to the teeth, so it's no surprise that they end up standing up to Mr. Burns and his goons. Some of the decent moments which get this to a 3 include Homer not getting which one of the goons was a puncher and which was a laugher, and Homer and Burns not being able to handle the effects of the alcohol. Season 31, Episode 19, Warrin Priests, Part 1. When a young, charismatic new preacher comes to town and shakes things up at a church, Reverend Lovejoy investigates his mysterious past. My trivia for this one is the Jesus Says Relax t-shirt is a parody of the Frankie Says Relax t-shirt from the music video Relax by Frankie Goes to Hollywood. And my best moment was the animation in Lisa's meditation dream. This was a 1 out of 5. Yep, this was about as bad a start to a two-parter as it gets. It was so dull, and the scenes with the characters talking to each other seemed to go on forever. There was no real interesting points made about religion, in my opinion. But that should come as no surprise, given just how much of a cookie-cutter type character this new priest was. We have seen Reverend Lovejoy replaced numerous times by this point, and it's hard to keep getting up for redemption stories by him, which I assume is what Part 2 is going to be all about. I suppose a relaxed new take on religion the town gets is okay, and fits them well enough, but that isn't enough to justify this being a standalone episode, let alone a two-parter. Most of the jokes were unfunny, and there were quite a few cutaway ones, which came across as a bit desperate, like them trying to add more jokes in because they knew they never had enough. But hey, maybe Part 2 will make up for this by proving me wrong and being good. Let's find out, shall we? With Season 31, Episode 20, Warring Priests, Part 2. The plot is basically the same, so I'm not going to go through that again, but I do have some new trivia for you, which is Lisa's bulletin board, chronicling her disappointments, contains pictures from the previous episodes, Lisa's substitute, Lisa's pony, Round Springfield, the old man and Elisa, and the Lisa the tree hugger. And my best moment for Part 2 was Homer's reaction to being asked if he gets annoyed by Flanders, which you can see on the right there. So Part 2 gets a 2 out of 5. This was a slight improvement from Part 1, because there were at least a few nice moments. I mean, the actual plot was more of the same. I again didn't care for all the drama. involving Lovejoy, uncovering the guy's Bible-burning secret. It all matters not in the end anyway, because the guy leaves Springfield, I'm assuming never to be seen again. They try to make a point about using religion to unite people, which is fair enough I suppose, but I think people have to figure out their own worldview themselves, through some honest introspection. Whether that worldview includes religion or not, if all it takes to convince you of it is some modern cool looking guy, then I suspect you haven't thought about it hard enough. I did at least like Ned's over-the-top scripture battle with the dude, and as I said, Homer spitting out his drink, in response to being asked about how annoying Ned is, was a good joke. Overall though, it has to be said, this was a very weak two-parter, that at best could have been an average standalone episode if done right. Season 31, Episode 21, The Hateful Eight-Year-Olds. Lisa makes a new friend who loves horses, but she ends up getting bullied by her snooty group of friends. Meanwhile, Homer takes Marge on a romantic cruise. My trivia for this one is that the name of this episode is a reference to the 2015 film The Hateful Eight, and my best moment was Bart and Lisa working together. So I gave this one a 3 out of 5. For a while, this was heading towards a 2. Most of the first half was watching Lisa being picked on by a bunch of mean kids, which is hardly good viewing, and kind of comes across as a pity party for her. However, there was some good character stuff on show, which kind of made up for it by the end. Lisa's new friend, Addie, had some agency in the plot, which is more than can be said for a lot of one-off characters. I like how her personality creepily switched on a dime, and I know for a fact plenty of people do act like this, when faced with even a little bit of peer pressure. Sure, the way she eventually saves Lisa, and stands up to the other girls, is probably a bit unearned, but at the end of the day, these are kids, so trying to do some kind of deep dive into their petty morality is probably not the best idea. The other main thing I liked here was the Bart and Lisa dynamic. Bart teases her a bit at the start, which he's done many times before, but as we know, when the chips are down, he is always willing to help her. Him helping her to take revenge was cool, and the horse callback was also nicely done. The subplot of Homer and Marge and his cruise felt a bit pointless though, and this wasn't the funniest episode by any means. I think I gave it a pass just because it's quite rare to see solid characterizations in this era of the show. Season 31, Episode 22, The Way of the Dog. After he bites Marge, the family explores the tragic past of Santa's little helper. My trivia for this one is that She-Biscuit is a reference to the horse Seabiscuit, and my best moment was the ending. So, did the season finale end well? In my opinion it did. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Now, there were a few things about this episode I wasn't as fond of, but overall a solid story was still enough to see this to a 4. Now, even though I'm not the biggest fan of them, we haven't had a Santa's Little Helper story for a while, so I wasn't opposed to the idea, and it was interesting getting to the bottom of his past trauma. Some of the flashback scenes, and the bits of him just sitting around staring at the stain, were quite hard hitting, and it makes you want this woman to sort it all out for the dog. The callback to the first episode was very well done. It not only connected this episode, it did it in a way I didn't see coming. Bart's Christmas hat is such a minor detail that the revelation that he was wearing it when he first got Santa's Little Helper put a smile on my face. The ending of Santa's Little Helper reuniting with his mom was simple enough, but it still worked well for me as a feel-good conclusion. It will be interesting to see if She-Biscuit sticks around as their pet for next season. The jokes here were only average, which was one of my gripes. The family including Maggie taking turns to slap the bad dog owner was my favourite one. The biggest complaint I had here though, was the completely unnecessary man trying to marry the dog trainer. That was pure filler, and it was inexcusable that he appeared twice. Now, I don't want to leave this on a negative note, because it was quite an enjoyable and unique way to end the season. I just hope we get more solid character-driven stories like this in future. So that is all the individual episodes done, and here is a season 31 summary. The overall average season score is a rather disappointing 2.5, which is the joint second lowest so far. My least favourite episodes were Warring Priests Part 2 at 5, Treehouse of Horror 30 at 4, The Winter of Our Monetized Content at 3, Warring Priests Part 1 at 2, and Better Off Ned I found to be the worst. As far as the top 5 goes, Highway to Hell was 5th, Livin at Pura Vida was 4th, and there were only 3 4-rated episodes, which were Bart the Bad Guy at 3, Thanksgiving of Horror at 2, and I found the season finale, The Way of the Dog, to be the best of the year. So yeah, as the rating suggests, I did not like this season. The main problem was that it simply wasn't funny enough for me to enjoy. There were hardly any real laugh-worthy moments for me. And that's pretty sad for a comedy show. In fact, the more I think about it, this may be the least funny I have ever found a season. Sure, seasons 24, 27 and 28 may have had the worst individual episodes, but this was every bit as consistently boring as those seasons were. That was shown by the fact that this season had loads of 2-rated episodes. I do have to say though, that in a few of the episodes here, I saw the tiniest glimpse of potential. The best episodes here, like Bart the Bad Guy and The Way of the Dog, had some good character stuff, which gives me at least a little hope that seasons 32 and 33 can build on that. I know those seasons are liked a bit better by the fanbase, so I really hope that I will feel the same way. I'm really longing for a Simpsons season that I truly enjoy again. After I finish season 33, I will reveal my plans on what is coming next to the channel, but rest assured that I will still be sure to include the odd bit of Simpsons content for all the Simpsons fans who are subbed to the channel. Again, I'll reveal more about the details on that later on. But anyway, that's all here from me. I just didn't have many interesting things to say about this season. I hope you still enjoyed it regardless though. And again, a big thank you guys for bearing with me as I battled through the illness to make this video. I've got to go and rest my voice now, so as always guys, take care.